Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 360 of the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. Check them out at PerformBetter.com. I'm your host, Anthony Renna. The show notes are located at ContinueFit.com or StrengthCoachPodcast.com. All right, today on the StrengthCoach.com and MBSC.TV Coach's Corner, spoke to Coach Boyle about an article that was on Simply Faster from Matt Clark called "When Should Track Athletes Lift?" Coach Boyle put it on the forum as "When Should Athletes Lift?" and kind of started a discussion about that. I thought it was pretty interesting, so I got him on to talk about an overview of this whole concept, what Coach Clark's solution was, some of the positive and negatives of lifting before or after a practice, and lifting after games. We also touched on a speed question that Coach Boyle was asking on Twitter. I also did something a little different for this episode. I have on Sean Skane, former strength coach for the Anaheim Ducks and Minnesota Wild, Boston University, and we did a short interview on his experience in the NHL of lifting after games. I had an opportunity to kind of watch that actually happen in real time after an Anaheim Ducks game. I want to talk to him about his thoughts on this article and some of the ideas expressed in it. All right. AG1 by Athletic Greens, 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. I use it every day. For me, it fills the gaps in my nutrition. Mostly been using it as a pre-workout. It's been working pretty well. AG1 is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/strengthcoach. All right, today I have on my old friend Mike Potenza. Mike just finished his first year as director of performance from the Golden State Warriors. He spent 16 years with the San Jose Sharks in the NHL before, so I wanted to get him on. I wanted to wait till the season ended and just ask him about how the whole transition went. I mean, 16 years in the NHL. How was it to kind of work with the Warriors? By the way, don't forget the Warriors were coming off a world championship. So they just won. They have a strong personality and one of the best players in the world in Steph Curry. So really want to see how that whole thing worked out, what helped him in the transition and what he learned, and really just, hey, how different are the sports? For the Naamly Maximizing the Member Experience, Sumit Seth, founder of Naamly, is going to talk about dealing with negative online reviews. He's got some great tips. Naamly helps you build relationships through personalized communication so your members stay longer and pay longer. Go to Naamly.com, Naamly.com. You can schedule a demo to get a feel for what it's all about. Use the referral code StrengthCoach to get started on your free 30-day trial. Don't forget Perform Better, the online sale right now, 50% off a bunch of stuff, including bumper plates, kettlebells, and dumbbells. The summit dates and presenters for Chicago and Providence, which are coming up. I'm actually flying in the morning to Long Beach, where I'm speaking on Saturday. I don't think this is going to be out by then, though. But take advantage of early bird specials and hotel discounts at each location. And don't forget, if you're having some financial trouble, call Perform Better. Let them know your situation. They're going to work something out with you. Their motto is that they won't turn anyone away. Their mission is to get trainers educated as best as possible. Don't let the cost hold you back. They'll work something out with you. Guys, check it all out at PerformBetter.com. Lots of things to get to. So let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, everybody, now it's time for the StrengthCoach.com and MBSC.TV Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. You can try StrengthCoach.com out for 7 days for free. Totally new format, user-friendly, same great forum. As always, go to StrengthCoach.com for your 7-day free trial. Coach, how you doing?
I am doing well, Anthony. It's been a while since we talked.
I know. I kind of had a little bit of, I've been running around, and I did one in kind of May and then one in June, and I'm going to get back on track now. So just kind of had to, I don't know, get re-excited for some stuff. And, you know, you and I were just talking about that. Actually, really, if you think about it, some of these things, sometimes I haven't been excited lately about some of the stuff out there. And sometimes when I'm not that excited, I get lazy with the podcast. I'm always up for your talks, but then to go out and to figure out like what are people talking about right now, and what do people want to hear? I got Mike Potenza on today, and we're going to talk about. I really want to talk about the transition from being in the NHL for so long, and then going into the NBA. Right, that's something I want to talk to him about, and then a few other topics. But
Yeah, I think it'll be really. I think that'll be a really interesting talk. I'll look forward to hearing that myself because it's. I know when I jumped into baseball, it actually was fun. It was invigorating. I enjoyed the process of being in baseball just because it wasn't what I had always done, and I think that will be very much the case for Mike. Obviously, the athlete change alone from going from hockey players to basketball players, and I guarantee people always will talk about the basketball guys and they're spoiled and this and that. And I'm going to bet that he says actually they're all pretty nice guys. And it was enjoyable because that was my experience with baseball. I had someone the other day say, "Oh, baseball must have been horrible." I said, "No, I had a lot of fun with the baseball guys." So I'll be looking forward to seeing this one come out or hearing this one come out, I guess.
Yeah, I believe it or not, I actually have Sean Skane on. He's going to come on for like 10 minutes to talk about what you and I are about to talk about, because Sean was one of the first people that I knew were putting it into practice, this idea about lifting after games. I actually witnessed it when he was with the Ducks, these 15-minute lifts after the game. But you had recommended an article from Simply Faster by Matt Clark. When should track athletes lift? And now, again, that's an important part of it, track athletes. So, but he did say, I'll just read a little bit. Is it before practice when work is performed without fatigue from sports practice, impeding the quality of the lift? Or is it after practice so athletes can train without fatigue from the weight room, so they can practice without fatigue from the weight room, interfering with that practice quality? And he said for sprinters and jumpers, this is why it's important to distinguish between the court sports and the field sports. Many training days are not the short bouts of 10 to 30 meter flies and block starts that can actually prime the lift immediately after. Some are, but there are also fatiguing speed endurance and special endurance intervals, race models, and extensive jump and plyo sessions that aren't present in many field and court sports. A set schedule of lifting after practice often means lifting after these taxing sessions. So you had mentioned this article, it brought me to it. You had thought it made you think. I thought it was pretty cool. I wanted to talk to you about, about this idea of the fact that you worked at BU. So you worked in a setting where the games were only on the weekends, but you did have practice. So that's a different story. And then you went into baseball. So I wanted to get the different sports idea, and then talk to you about how you did it and how you do it at MBSC. So talk to me about this article a little bit.
Well, the one thing I wanted everybody to read it because I just wanted people to think about, why are you doing it the way you're doing it? Are you doing it the way you're doing it because you have a schedule and that you can't deviate from? The coach has said this is the lifting time. Or have you? The nice thing I thought about this article is the guy had really thought about it in terms of, and he had said, or his idea was that the best way to do it is probably to lift twice a day, which again, if I'm Altus and I've got kind of professional track guys, I might be able to play with that model. I might be able to look at this and say, hey, I'm going to do my explosive stuff before we go out and do our running. And then I'm going to do my running. And then I'm going to come back in and do my sort of whatever, more prehab-y, volume-y stuff, whatever after. But I think the biggest thing for me, the biggest takeaway was, are you really thinking about why you're doing what you're doing? And I've kind of alluded to this, I think, in a couple of podcasts and in some of my talks. We all have a lens. So, but like I said, for me, my lens was kind of initially football. And so for a long time, I sort of saw everything as a football strength coach. Then I spent a long time as a hockey strength coach. And then I started to see things through just this kind of hockey only lens. Then I became a dad of, a single sport kid, and I saw it through the dad of the single sport kid lens. And then I became the dad of a multi-sport kid, and I saw it through the dad of the multi-sport kid lens. So I think it's really important to try, it's almost like uh, when you get the eye test and the eye doctor like switches it, is it better here or
Yeah.
here? Better here or here, and be able to look and think, okay, I need to look through all these different lenses and think about, okay, why am I doing what we're doing? Like we just got done. Mark's team won the state championship. They went 22-1. And we just lifted every other day. We lifted day before games, day after games. Because truthfully, the competition wasn't great. We didn't a lot of times have to worry about who we were playing. You look at, like you alluded to, baseball. Baseball, it doesn't matter. You're playing every day. So you can't look at it and say, well, it's an off day. Whereas, and you said you're going to have Sean on. And with Sean, like I didn't start. There were guys lifting after games, but I think I popularized it in the 90s when I was with the Bruins because we really got into it. But that was about maximizing recovery. My feeling was, hey, I'd rather get 5 minutes of work out of these guys at 11 o'clock at night and let them have all of tomorrow off than, than wait till tomorrow. And now you get guys coming in. Now they're sore from the night before. They got banged around. And now, you get up the next morning and you're feeling it a little bit more than you might have been feeling it right post game. Whereas if I just jumped you in there and we'd literally go in post game and I used to call them, hit workouts, right? They're the old, Nautilus 1 set kind of workout, and not even 1 set to failure, just 1 set. I'd tell guys, come on in, do a set of chin-ups, warm up on the bench, then we'll put something on the bench. We'll do a set of bench. We'll do a set of 1-leg squats. We'll do an ab exercise. And I literally would tell guys sometimes, I'll have you out of there literally in 5 minutes. If you give me 5 minutes of focused attention and do exactly what I say, you can leave. But I'd get sometimes 80-game season, we might get 40 4-minute lifts, 5-minute lifts in that really pay dividends for us. And the guy I can remember most vividly, Mike Sullivan, who now has been, the Penguins coach for a long time, but he would wither away to nothing during the season when he was in Calgary because he didn't lift. And he'd get down. I mean, by the end of the year, he'd be in the 170s, start the season in the 190s. And when he got traded to Boston, I had been his college strength coach, and I was like, Sully, you just got to, we just got to do it. And he was always a great guy, always super compliant. But I can still remember he benched 225 for 5 probably in April. And he's like, I've never been this strong. And all we literally did, it was like we'd put 135 on the bar, do a warm-up set, and then we'd throw something on and go for it. Whatever it was, 185 for 10. But by the end of the season, he was still in the 180s and he was benching 225 for 5. And he had maintained a lot of mass. So it's continually and consistently, I think, readjusting your lens. And again, as my usual, I talked to you. You asked me one question, I talked for 5 minutes, but it's reading these kind of articles. Okay, why would I read an article about when you should lift during track practice? And my thought process was because I might learn something. I did, and it not even did I learn something. It just prompted some thoughts in my head.
Coach, if you were back, because I like this, I love the idea of splitting it up, and I'll just give everybody who hasn't read the article yet. He was talking about, like, okay, the AM portion, he wanted to do the heavier lifts because obviously if his practice was in the afternoon. So they had, class, they had lunch, then they had practice. So he would do like a power clean, back squat, bench press, right? So he would just do 8 sets all together, all at around 85% of their, so 3 reps, 2 and 3 reps. And then in the PM portion, he would save things for like hamstring work, some carries, and a hanging knee raise. So nothing crazy either in the afternoon, just the big heavy stuff. Do you feel like maybe you would try something like that if you were at BU still, where you had a little more control, things are a little more consistent?
I don't know if I would in college, because college, again, you get dictated to by the practice schedule and the class schedule. So for us, it was always, you lifted based on, okay, am I out of class in time to do it before, or do I have to do it after? It was rare that you would have guys and have access to somebody both before and after. But I might, because we did have some guys who would have been available in both slots. And I might have said, hey, let's try this. Let's try a little bit before, 15 minutes before, 15 minutes after, which I think you could have, if you wanted to do something more difficult, a little bit more volume, whatever it was, you could throw that in after practice and not worry about it. Because I would always look at things and think, are they going to impact practice? That was always my concern. Is it going to impact practice if I do this? Because guys would always say, oh, if we lift, I don't want to do, guys, I don't want to work my legs before practice. And I was like, you're fine. We had to really kind of, I don't know, Jedi mind trick these guys into believing that it wasn't going to impact them. And a lot of times that was by doing something really, really low load and low volume. Like we might have said, hey, we're going to, at that time, maybe we were doing front squats. We're going to do 2 sets of front squats, one at 50%, one at 70% for 5 reps before you go out. And a guy who was a 400 squatter would come in and think, okay, I got to do 70. I got to do 280 for 5, 1 set before I go out. They're not going to go out and think, oh, my legs were shot. Because and that's what you start to realize too, is you get into why am I lifting? And for me, I'm lifting for strength and power, ideally increases or maintenance. If I've got younger kids, I'm trying to increase strength and power over the course of the season. If I've got older guys, I'm trying to maintain that strength and power, all the way into the playoffs. You don't need to do a lot. And that kind of brings up, I don't know if you saw that, there's a Twitter feed that's out there right now, Twitter thread of just this ungodly lower body workout that somebody posted. You can look, I have a couple comments if you look at mine, but it was legitimately, I think I got to 200 sets or 200 reps. It was, insane. I started multiplying sets times reps, adding it up. And it was a 200 plus rep lower body program that some football kid had brought in from his college football coach or something, and just absurd. So when I look at that stuff, I think what we don't do enough of, again, you talk about lenses, but we don't do enough and say, okay, what are we doing this for? Are we trying to get bigger? Are we trying to get stronger? Are we trying to get faster? Kind of what's the goal? And then does the program actually work towards the goal, or does it in some ways work against the goal? Which in season could be very possible.
Yeah, I remember hearing about Darryl Nelson talking about the studies that were going on at USA Hockey Development Center, and just saying, because they played Friday and Saturday nights, and what they noticed was when they stopped the practice on Saturday, that morning skate, they had all the data about how much more energy they had. They, just the look test where they were seeing the second and third periods, the guys were talking about having more energy when they didn't have that morning skate because they had all week, right? They were doing all that training. So I just feel like there's an element, and when you're lifting heavy too, like I did deadlifts last night. That round, I go to 1.5 times my body weight, which is a good amount for me at 56. And I think my legs aren't ever. So I'm doing set reps of 2 and 3 leading up to that 325, so I feel like you could do that before practice even without really a lot of fatigue, or, it's when you start doing lunges and, all those type of things for reps that I feel like you're going to do something where it's going to affect the practice. Would you agree?
Yes, I would. And that's one of the things I always talk about when the guys start getting stronger, like when we start going up to heavier loads, a lot of times I'll have warm-up sets. Like someone might look at it and think, we're going to do, we might do 5, 1, 1, 1, 5 in the deadlift, because we might do 5 at 135, and then we might do 1 at 225, and then 1 at 280, and then 5 at 3, whatever, in those types of situations, because it's the same thing. What's the purpose of the build-up sets? The stimulus comes from the heavy set or the heavy sets. And for us, it's usually heavy set. We're very much we're kind of a one set. Like today we deadlifted 3 sets of 8 theoretically. And the guys did 130. The stronger guys did 135 for 8, 225 for 8, 335 for 8. So if you looked at it percentage wise, and that was when I wrote in the comment on the thread, if you said we probably did 8 at 40%, 8 at 60%, and then 8 at somewhere 75 to 80-ish, depending on where that guy's actual 1RM was. But the reality was the 40 and 60s were meaningless warm-up sets, and they could have been I like to do more, 135. I like to, kind of whatever, grease the groove, get somebody moving a little bit. And then the next set, it's like, I just want to get used to having another plate on the bar. That's all I want you to think. Okay, I felt that weight. So I'm not, I would never have anybody jump. That's why it kind of goes back as we jump around. The plate-based warm-up idea. We don't even do percentages. We do plate-based warm-up. We know where we're going. We know where we want to end up. And the warm-up is strictly, the reality is the warm-up. If we're going to 405, it's 1 plate, 2 plates, 3 plates, 4 plates, right? That's just, no one's thinking about, if 405 for 5, if my deadlift is 450, 135 is 30% or something, 33%. Totally meaningless warm-up, really, except I don't like somebody grabbing 225 pounds and warming up with 225 pounds. I don't think the body is meant to work that way. But the reality is 225 is only 50%. If I looked at you and said, hey, just warm up with 50% of your max, you might be comfortable with that. But any good lifter isn't doing that. Any good lifter that I ever worked out with, if you went in and said, hey, somebody wanted to bench press 405 for 5 today, I am going to guarantee you that guy did a warm-up at 135, a warm-up at 225, and a warm-up at 315. And he never thought about what percentage of his max those were. He simply thought of, these are my warm-up sets. Yeah. And if someone wanted to bench 315, they probably got a 275 or 8 set in there because that was 245s and 25, and that was what made sense for that next warm-up. And so I guess all of this stuff, and even our conversation, is intended to do what it always does, which is provoke thought, get people to think about, why am I actually doing what I'm doing? We're right back to, 7 years ago, Perform Better talk in terms of start with why, right? You go back to this idea and say, why am I doing this?
Love it. Coach, it's not the same topic, but this idea about sprinting, and I feel like, where does that fit in? And because there was a tweet and you asked like, hey, where'd you get that stat from? Yeah. Players who reach above 90% of their 95% of their max speed in at least only one effort per week are less likely to experience muscle injuries compared to those who are less than 85%. So where does that fit into this idea of before and after practice and as well?
Always, to me, that's always before, and that's always early on. And with any of my coach friends that I'm trying to talk to about that, I always will say, hey, it's after the warm up and the first thing that you're going to do in terms of from a practice design standpoint is get that. And I can say it now, and I hate to say things. I hate to make jinx statements, but our lacrosse season is over. And again, I said we were 22-1, so we played 23 games. With scrimmages, we probably played 27 games. We did not have a muscle pull, not one. That was, we had some guys that was sore, but nobody pulled a muscle and was like, okay, I'm going to sit out this game because I pulled a muscle. And none of them, and the muscles that we did get, none of them were hamstrings. We had a couple guys sore groin, sore hip flexors, a couple sore, kind of calf, Achilles things. And again, nothing that didn't resolve itself with 1 day of massage therapy kind of treatment and right back at it. So I've believed this, what that study said all along. And it's for us. And our guys, the other thing, our guys love it. Our guys are always like, are we sprinting today? Are we sprinting? And when I say we're not sprinting, they're like, what do you mean we're not sprinting? And sometimes I have days where, I don't really want to sprint. We lift it, we got to play tomorrow. And the guy's like, no, let's sprint. Come on. And they want to sprint. And then I'll say, well, let's see, try a couple. And they'll invariably work themselves out to a 15-yard fly and try to break a record. One day we set like 5 PRs one day, probably a month ago, where guys were outside and guys were feeling good and guys start, running and kind of challenging each other. And all of a sudden we've got 5 guys who are recording their best times ever. So it's crazy, and it definitely works.
Yeah. Along those same lines, I loved how he was talking about not having the hamstring taxing exercises in the weight room before practice or even, that morning. That's why he put the RDL after. He doesn't want the hamstrings. Like, do it after, because that's when, when we're going to break down that muscle fibers, those muscle, right? And then there's a potential for injury. So I do like the way he thought this
Our
out.
most hamstring heavy lift is always, we go Monday through Thursday in the summer. It's always Thursday. And we will have sprinted on Monday and Wednesday. And we will then do sort of our, what would be our lighter of the two lower body days, kind of our non-trap bar deadlift day on Thursday. And that day will be more posterior chain oriented. Exactly with that idea in terms of, I don't want to fatigue hamstrings. Even, if we sprint Monday and then we do lower body on Tuesday, which we do, I don't want to do a really hamstring heavy day on Tuesday, knowing that we're going to sprint again on Wednesday. But on Thursday, we can do that. So it always is going back to that why idea. Why am I doing this? And then the when, because what we really talked about with all of this is, when am I doing it? And sometimes you're doing it. It's when I can. So for us, I mean, during the lacrosse season, it was almost exclusively before practice. We had guys who were coming in right after school at 3:30, and they had to be warming up or on the field warming up at 4:30. So we had 45 minutes to lift, and it was like, hey, this is the time we got. So this is what we're going to do.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right, Coach. We will let you go. Have a happy 4th of July, and say hello to, I think that's Cindy in the background going up the
That's
stairs.
Mark going up the stairs.
Oh, there's Mark. Sorry, Mark. The long hair, the flow.
Mark going up there because he's actually, it's funny. You're seeing him in the mirror up here.
Oh, yeah. That's true. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, I saw the flow. I thought it was Cindy. So, Coach, have a happy.
That means he needs a haircut.
There you go. Have a good one, Coach.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
All right, guys. So now, kind of a special part of the podcast, right? I don't normally do this, but this was kind of something where the article that I referenced in Coach Boyle's, in the Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle a couple minutes ago, when should track athletes lift? And it was this idea about, obviously, if it's before practice, when the work is performed without fatigue from the sports practice, impeding the quality of the lift, or is it after practice or a game, as we're going to get to in a second, so athletes can train without fatigue from the weight room interfering with practice quality. So I have on Sean Skane. Sean was a strength coach for the Anaheim Ducks, for Minnesota Wild, for Boston University. Now he's on his own, working with a lot of youth hockey players. So Sean, first of all, thanks for doing this.
Oh, and always a pleasure. It's great to see you, man.
And so just a reminder to everybody, Sean was my first guest on the Strength Coach podcast over 17 years ago. So, and we actually talked about this, and I got to witness this. So Sean, let me just give everybody a little bit of a background. So what Sean used to do is, and these are pro athletes, so don't say you can't do it with your athletes. Sean was doing it with his pro athletes, Anaheim Ducks. After a game, they would go and do a short lift because obviously they're warmed up. Sean, can you give us an overview of how this worked, when you did it? Did you do it after every game? Why did you do it? Because you had two different types of coaches, and then we can name names. Randy Carlisle, who was kind of a little bit more of a hard ass and, probably didn't like to give guys days off, and Bruce Boudreau, who was kind of the opposite, kind of let you guys do your thing, or maybe probably gave guys a little bit more time off. So you actually had two different coaches as well working this. So tell us how it worked for you. Was it every game, et cetera? And how it worked maybe with the different coaches?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, my first coach that I worked for was Mike Babcock. And I recall he gave me a copy of the schedule for the season. And he was like, here you go. I'm sure you have a plan. Get it rolling. And of course, I was like, yeah, I do. And I see the schedule. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute here. There's a lot of games here. And post-game lifting was logistically, it was for the logistics only. It was the question of, when am I going to get the guys to lift? And I started with Anaheim in early 2000s, and strength and conditioning in sports science was nowhere near what it is now. But luckily, I had a captain, Paul Correa, loved to lift. And one of his main things about me being there, and which I knew that ahead of time, was getting our younger players to be strength training more. And Paul was a strength training. He was doing it on his own. He had his own program. But you had these other guys that didn't really buy into it. So that was my job, to come in there. And I came from a college background. I just finished up a season at Boston College working with their hockey team. And I didn't know any better. I was like, you know what? I'm a team strength and conditioning coach. We're going to lift when, I hate to say it, but when I say we're going to lift, in a way, like when I schedule workouts, we're lifting. Now it became, okay, when are we going to lift? And so for me, I never really agreed with strength training the day before a game. Not to say that I wouldn't do plyometrics or agility work, but in terms of like your bang for your buck strength training exercises, like for me back then, it was your front squats, it was your bench press, it was your chin ups. So I had to find a way to get our lifts in as logistically manner as possible. And so we lifted after games, and it was unbelievable. When you had a situation where your captain was leading the charge into the weight room after a game. Okay, boys, let's go. We got to get our lift in. And, back then we didn't have much of a weight room. It was just it was like a curtained off part of an old locker room that I would have access to. And I'd get access to the locker room. I have to keep my equipment behind the curtain and wheel it out to like the space where the old locker room was. But yeah, I really think the culture was set in stone. That like, okay, we lift after games. John has a plan for us. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to buy in and trust him. And I also had that same level of trust with my guys. Like they knew, okay, if I had a workout, I'd write it on the board, the grease board. Hey, post game lift. They'd all go in and lift. And I'm not saying they were 45 minutes of 1 hour strength training sessions. I mean, you came down, right, to see a workout, right?
Yeah.
You saw, yeah. And so like they were in and out in 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah. I saw that.
And I was okay with that. You just kind of like micro dosing over the course of the season. You're trying to prevent the loss of the strength and the conditioning that they gain during the off season as best as you can. And I really felt that, especially with that culture with the Ducks and with the Wild. When I got to the Wild, we lifted after games, and those guys were awesome too. Like Jared Spurgeon, unbelievable captain, Mikko Koivu. There was never any like, why do we lift after games? Some of those guys were like that, but for the most part, when leadership was on board, and that was easy to do.
Don, when you read this article that Matt Clark wrote, and he kind of talks about splitting it up, does it make you make you think a little bit about what you're doing now, maybe even some of the things you could have done then? Is there anything that kind of sparks some aha moments with this article?
Yeah, I think, maybe theoretically it's tough to consider. Like you have an 82 game season. Maybe you do your plyos before the game, or if you do an Olympic list, maybe you do them before the game, and you come after the game and get your traditional strength exercises in. Like you think about stuff like that. But from a practicality perspective, in the NHL, you're on the road a lot. You're on the road for 41 games. You're at home for 41. I typically try to get more strength training sessions in when we're at home, because the road situations, you didn't know what you were going to get. But after you've been through the league a few times, you know what you have in certain situations. But yeah, I mean, I think, with the collegiate track team, for example, or you have your short distance sprinters, if you have your middle distance runners, for sure, you could probably quote unquote activate the nervous system with your plyos or your power cleans, whatever you want to do, and then come back after the practice and hit your slower strength exercises. So you're not eliciting that kind of, that, it's not soreness, but that fatigue while you're training.
Yeah. Is there anything like when you look at from training these kids who are home in Minnesota where you are now, including your son with the USA national development team, and you're working with these guys and they're still skating. We know they're still skating, maybe not as intense as in season, but is there anything that would be applied like, hey, yeah, guys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do our heavy lift in the morning. And then I know you're skating today, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. This afternoon, you come back, or right after practice, come back. We're going to do like he was talking about some of the other lifts and kind of 2 short sessions. Would that make sense logistically, or probably not?
No, I think in the off season, I think for me, the work in the weight room, especially with these younger kids, needs to be prioritized. So I would do that first and then get their skate in later. Yeah.
Yeah.
And during the season when we would have our workouts after practices, we would have some guys. I would always prefer before practice. Get your workout done before practice, then go skate with your team. But some guys did like to come in after practice and get their lift in. And, in the professional levels, you have to give a little leeway there. But yeah, like we trained after games all the time. And I always have discussions with other people like, well, if they have energy to lift after the game, then they didn't give it their all during the game. And I always be like, you know what? You can see it. You watch the playoffs this past year. A regular season game is nothing like the playoffs. So that's why we did not lift. Sometimes we didn't lift at all during the playoffs. Unless there was like extra day, a travel day, whatever it was, or we happened to win a series, we'd get a lift in. But, they're able to do that. You have to adjust to the minutes played. Your first line guys, your top pair defensive guys, and your starting goalie, you're going to back off a little bit. But for the most part, your fourth line guys, your bottom pair D, they can get a good lift in after a game.
Yeah, I love it. I love what you say. There's a lot of things to take into consideration when we look at these things.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I wanted to get you on that kind of real world practical knowledge that you had when you were doing it. Like I said, I remember Team Mussolani was on the team at the time and kind of came out after that. And George Paros was on the team.
Yeah.
A couple of those other guys, Niedermeyer.
And Scotty was our captain. He's right there. He's doing it right there with the guy.
Yeah.
And I will say that, the toughest part for me after a win, like it was like awesome. I don't care if it was like Wednesday night against someone, not that good. We're getting a lift in, unbelievable. But there are times you lose a game. You're not going 82-0. So like the professionalism by the players to come in, sometimes with their head down, sometimes you wouldn't hear a word because maybe the game ended a different way. I'd always tell my assistant, like, hey, all right, that was a tough one, but we still have to coach. And, we did that. And our players are always awesome about, being coachable in those situations.
Yeah, I love it. I'm just glad you didn't say like after an easy game against the Islanders, whatever. I would have been pissed. I would have
like after a bad game. What were you thinking there? That didn't happen. No, so
good stuff.
We always kept it positive. So
yeah, awesome. Well, Sean, thanks for coming on. I just wanted to get you on and kind of get an overview, like I said, about the practicality of it. So thanks again for doing this, and hopefully we'll get you on. Good luck with everything. Guys, look out for Sean's son. He's going to be in the NHL one day. That's my guarantee. What's my guarantee?
Long way to go. We'll see.
Yeah, long way to go. That's right.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good stuff. All right.
Love it.
Welcome to Naamly's Maximizing the Member Experience segment. My name is Sumit Seth, and I'm the co-founder of Naamly. In an earlier segment, I had recollected the time my friend Scott and I visited this fancy Italian restaurant in San Diego and had a lackluster experience, which prompted Scott to share a negative feedback with the maitre d', who admitted he didn't know how to respond and fix the problem. That segment resulted in me having multiple conversations with clients and listeners alike who reached out to me to ask what I felt was the best way to handle negative reviews received online. After all, we do live in a digital age. Yes, there are going to be some shitty days when your trainer loses his cool, doesn't take a bath, comes in late, you have dirty bathrooms, or there's construction going on in your gym. Whatever the situation, here are 5 things to keep in mind, which will help you to showcase your commitment to customer excellence which is likely to keep your reputation not only intact, but also has the potential to enhance it. 1. Ensure you provide a timely response. The sooner the better, and definitely within 24 hours. Remembering that anything you say online has the potential to stay there forever. So, 2, make sure you're calm and composed, regardless of the tone used in the review. If anything, see if you can learn from the feedback about the areas of the business you really do need to improve, and just apologize, empathize, and try moving the conversation offline for a few reasons. 1, to provide a more personalized communication. And 2, if the conversation does get ugly, you're not airing dirty laundry and impacting your brand image. After this point, the 4th would be to offer an alternative solution that rectifies the problem and just pacifies the client. Most common forms involved a refund or a discount or a complimentary something as a gesture of goodwill. Even another chance, hey, come on over and let's see if we can make it up to you. Once done, make sure to politely ask the customer to delete or update the negative review. Most often than not, they're likely to comply. Now, in case you find someone who is just adamant of keeping the conversation on public forum and is really a troll with a complaint that is totally unjustified and not warranted, it's okay to switch gears and take charge. Control the narrative, clarify the misconceptions raised, and provide a detailed explanation line by line. And overall, make sure that your response is twice as long as the negative review that was left, so other readers understand the depths you go into ensuring a positive experience for your clients. You have to defend your business at that point, and it's all about your brand. 5, remember, one negative review isn't going to bring you down. The power is in the pattern. So as a general rule, have a system in place that drives capturing 5-star reviews from existing clients. So if you do get that occasional negative review on your off day, it doesn't garner that much attention or affect your score too much. Till next time, this is Sumit Seth, co-founder of Naamly. For more info, please check out Naamly.com and schedule a free demo to discover how we can make collecting online reviews that much quicker and easier. Use the referral code StrengthCoach to get started on a free 30 days trial, no strings attached.
All right, guys, now time for the Hit the Gym of the Strength Coach segment, brought to you by AG1 by Athletic Greens, 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, and whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. I use it every day. It fills the gaps in my nutrition. I'm actually in Long Beach right now, so I brought my little travel packs. The cool thing is Athletic Greens will give you a year's supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. They come in very handy. So all you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/strengthcoach for that deal. All right, today I have on my old friend Mike Potenza, who just finished his first year as director of performance for the Golden State Warriors, which still sounds weird to me. Mike spent 16 seasons with the San Jose Sharks, the much superior sport, by the way. He's also the managing partner of Tactical Fitness and Performance, so he does a lot of other things as well. But today I really wanted to focus on this transition, almost like why or how this ended up happening. To go to a completely different sport, I don't really hear that too much. What has helped him in that transition? Maybe what are some of the things he was scared about and really what he learned? So, Mike, thanks for doing this, bud.
Thanks for having me back. It's always great to talk to you, obviously, and love the show. So appreciate you having me back.
All right. Let's get into it, Mike, about the move. All right. A lot of people I would have thought, maybe you're going to work with the Kings or, the Islanders or the Rangers, and here you are working in a completely different sport. And let's remember, everybody, the Warriors were coming off of a world championship So that
So
to
my
me,
timing was terrible.
yeah, I
to be
mean,
honest
throw.
with
It's not
you.
like you're working with, I'm so excited for my buddy Greg Cronin, right? He just got
Yeah.
made the head coach for the Anaheim Ducks, but they've been sucking for the last 3-4 years. They got a lot of talent. He's got a lot of opportunity, not as much pressure. He's always got, you always have pressure as a coach, but for you, man, you're going in there with one of the top players in the world and them coming off a championship. So, Mike, how did this happen, first of all, with you? Like, were you kind of looking? Was it something that just happened? Did you ever think you'd end up in another sport, especially basketball?
Yeah. Well, and I guess, and Ant, you would know this, but for the listeners, like, unfortunately, like, you're always, I was always I'm always the type of person, like, I was always worried from day one with the Sharks about losing my job. And maybe it was some may say, like, geez, that's a shitty way to kind of live and work in a profession. But it was a healthy fear, and it combined with my, I guess, passion to be as good as I can be in the field. It was a recipe for me always pushing the envelope. But you always have to worry because I got 3 kids, and two of the 3 are teenagers, and one is a few years away from being a teenager. So I owe it to my family and my amazing wife who stuck with me through this, like, to make sure I am ready for the next step. I cannot get caught with my pants down and not have a job and not provide for them. And I was worried about that. So to say I was looking at a time when the Sharks were in transition and with no general manager, I was listening. I can't say I was actively looking. I was more listening. And how it came to fruition was the vice president of health and performance, Rick Celebrini, and I are very good friends. And he actually helped us with a lot of rehabs from the Sharks players 12 years ago. So a position came available for a director role. And him and I talked numerous times. And I even asked him the question, like, do you think I'm going to be a good fit? Like, I'm coming from a whole different sport. And he's like, yeah, but you view the athlete model, not just a basketball model, or actually just like a hockey model. I think that, for all the different professions that you see at Perform Better clinics, everybody's coming from somewhere else. Hockey strength coaches just don't go to hockey events, and basketball strength coaches just don't go to basketball events. So
Yeah.
I've always looked through the lens, and Mike talks about it all the time, but you always look through the lens, like, I want to make better athletes, not just hockey players, right? Or not just basketball players. So I think that's helped me. That's allowed me to transition well. And I think that's kind of what gave me like kind of a prerequisite to be able to make the move to the NBA.
Yeah. Was that the thing? Was that like your biggest fear? Like not fitting in? Or was it looking at like, oh, I don't even know much about basketball. I'm sure you do, but in terms of really knowing, like, hockey, what was the big fear going over?
Oh, the big fear was like, oh, this guy's got 16 years. This guy's career has been built on the sport of hockey. And yeah, I have a private military business that I consult, with for human performance programs in the military. And I've worked with several different athletes in major pro sports over the years in the off seasons, on a one-on-one level, or maybe just a couple extra clients. But it was like, okay, well, how am I, a non-basketball guy, going to get an NBA job with this type of title, And it truly was, pushed from Rick, and Rick, holds a lot of clout in this organization, as he should. He's an amazing therapist. He's an amazing vice president overseeing performance and medicine here. And everybody trusts him. So, Steve Kerr was like, hey, if you believe in this guy and he's going to help us and help our players, then great. And it's been, knock on wood, a great transition and fun to work with all these characters. So,
Mike, how it's funny, we have Sean Skane on today in a 10-minute segment. I asked him about one thing specifically. Having you guys on together, it's kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
But when I talked to Sean, and people are going to hear that, I've already heard it if they're listening to this interview, he basically was talking about the importance of Paul Correa, right? The captain, Scotty Niedermayer, right? I forget the other captain. Talk to me about that kind of initial, like your meetings maybe with players and maybe getting buy-in. Because again, you have a Steph Curry is one of the best in the world. I'm sure. I don't know how basketball works with captains, but like the leaders in the room, how did you approach that?
I came in definitely explaining my philosophy went from a point of, okay, what have you learned over the years? There's been a lot of strength coaches here. There's been a few strength coaches who you've had on this podcast. And so there's been a good amount of turnover, but Rick has brought some stability here. He's been here for 5 years. And my approach with the athletes was like, look, what do you need at this point in your career? Here's my style and philosophy. Let's mesh these things together. And I came in at like promising myself, like, I'm gonna work my ass off like I always do. I want them to see like I'm not just coming in here and shuffling papers around and whatnot. I'm very active and put the time in, and I have no fear of travel. I've been traveling for 16 years, so as tough as it is to get into a city late at night, at least it's not Winnipeg and Edmonton and Calgary in the middle of February anymore. So I think that goes a long way with this group. I don't have to, I think everybody who knows me, like, I don't have to have a big ego. I don't have to be the loudest person in the room. I don't have to try to be the smartest person. I just take what I know and I applied it to their situation and what they feel like they need. And obviously use my experiences. The unique part about this, the two things that stand out about this group is that they train, like they work, on and off the court, which is great. And that's from Steph to Clay to Dre to Looney to all these guys, which is awesome. And everybody else follows. And if it's ever a difficult challenge to get somebody to train, and it's like, well, look at the guy you're sitting across from, the other thing is that they're getting older, and I do have experience with older players. We had Brent Burns, Joe Pavelski, Patrick Marleau, and Joe Thornton, and those guys played, two guys are on the 18th year in the league. The other two guys who were retired played 23 and 24 seasons, respectfully, with Joe and Patty. So I feel like I have a good grasp on, okay, what does the older athlete need? What does the older player need to sustain durability, resiliency, and obviously games, not to miss games later in their career. So that definitely helped with the communication and the kind of the buy-in.
Mike, just explain this role a little bit. So you have a strength coach under you, because I always get confused with titles, right?
Right. I know.
You're director of performance. So how's the structure work?
It's new to me too, with all the NBA titles, but how we do it here is Rick's at the vice president level. So he has a ton of meetings with, the GM, Mike Dunleavy now, and Bob Myers formerly, and obviously Steve and other coaches. And Rick is very much into the development side, heavily into the medical side, and lets me take the helm on the performance side. I have 3 strength coaches underneath me. And then there's an additional, actually 3 strength coaches, and one of the 3 is the G League strength coach, right?
Okay.
I have a hand in nutrition, so I'll actually oversee our nutritionist, who comes in and out a couple times a month, and then the other heads of departments and I collaborate together and manage everything as sports science, and then obviously sports medicine. So we're kind of Rick's captains or lieutenants, or whatever hierarchy you want to call. So we manage those things on a day-to-day when Rick cannot. But he gives us the freedom to run everything how we want, which is amazing, and it's fun, and I get to put my own spin on things, and get to really utilize the people I have. Am I writing the program day to day? No. Do I have oversight? Yeah, I do. A lot of my philosophy is embedded in there, but at the same time, I'm trying to learn how to be a director too, to empower people to put their gifts forward, and because I came into this job like these guys have been successful. So I'm not coming in here and totally turning the apple cart over or pulling the tablecloth out from underneath the silverware here. So I found out some things that we could get better at. I implemented them and then ran with the things that have been really good. So it's
Mike, how did you find those out though? Like, did you have meetings with all the team, the strength coaches, like one-on-ones, just trying to say, hey, what do you think could change here? What could be better here? What would you like to see? Were you just doing that, or
Yeah, I most certainly did. I met with all of the immediate performance staff members, which is 10, and then talked with some of the players, but mostly met with the staff and say, where can we get better? What's been good? Where roles changed when I came in or before I came in, so I was trying to understand those types of things. I tried to learn how my role interacted with the coaches, because I very much have a planning and scheduling role that is linked to what the coach's plan is during the day. So they want to know what performance is doing. I'll carry that message and kind of lay the groundwork and plan for that, in conjunction with our sports scientist who's looking at the loads throughout the month and after different games and whatnot, and actually individual player loads and what they need and what they don't need and how much rest we have to give. So I asked a lot of questions, and this year I promised myself, like, okay, I'm going to really take a hard look and try to see everything. And I couldn't just do that in 1 month because the year changes so much. And there's always different aspects of your team and of your season and of your players that it's different in January than it is in, April or in September or in August. So as I come full circle, I have a whole new set of questions. I'm a lot more comfortable. So now I can really get a big picture of, like, okay, now what more, or how can I build this program up to be better?
Mike, what's been the coolest, almost like aha moment? It's funny because Coach Boyle was like, we were talking a little bit about when he was at the Red Sox, and I guarantee you, because a lot of basketball guys get a bad rap. I guarantee you, he said, Mike's going to come on and say, the guys are great, they're hard workers, and there's it's kind of a misconception, whether that's just for where you're at with the Warriors or just in general in basketball. What's been kind of the cool thing, because a lot of people might be like, oh, Mike, hockey players, they'll run through a wall for you, they'll do this, and you're in a great situation, now you're coming here. What's been kind of a cool surprise for you maybe with basketball?
Yeah, I've been surprised at how much extra work they put in on the court. And that's not to say these guys, we have a very committed group. And I do, like Mike was right, like I do hear stories from other strength coaches. And when I ask about their guys and inquire, like, who puts its extra work in the weight room and things like that. And that's super cool to hear. That's reassuring to hear. But I'm really impressed with the extra time guys put in on the court, trying to craft their game and hone their game. And, we have a handful of guys that are on the court for 45 to 60 minutes before practice. And then we have guys who are on the court for 60 minutes after practice. And Steve runs a fairly long practice when we do practice. So it's cool to see that, but it really is, it's a pro athlete. It's a special kind of athlete, high character guy kind of thing, I think, because I saw the same from the big four in San Jose. They were on the ice 30 minutes early working on specific things, and they stayed after a little bit to hone their craft, and we're always thinking about it. So that's been awesome. I will tell you, as a fan, it's pretty friggin' cool to see the veteran players in the NBA in the different cities when when I would watch as a kid, seeing Danny Ainge, who was a Boston Celtic, like that was pretty cool. And I don't get stopped in my tracks a lot, but Dominique Wilkins, who looks like he can still play, walk by, I'm like, damn, that's Dominique, So that's been cool. I do have an appreciation and history for the game, and I guess those guys that you watched as a kid and now you see them in executive roles or coaching roles or TV roles, So it's pretty neat to see that.
Very cool.
On the side note, yeah.
Mike, what do you got here? Are you talking about the data scientists? I know football's incorporated that a lot. I know there's a lot. We talk about that with soccer. What is something that you wish you had? And this is not a cut against the Sharks, and mostly NHL. What are some things, because the NHL still is behind in a lot of ways too, right? Hey, what's some stuff you wish you had, that you're like, oh, this is cool. They got a data guy. They got this. They got that. What can you answer that?
I do wish I had someone dedicated to data. I was, and then on the data side, it's just when you're there for 16 years, you have a lot of questions to ask. You know what I mean? And a lot of those questions are centered around player performance, obviously, and health. And now that speed is. Everybody always said speed kills. Speed is the most coveted, athletic quality somebody can have, and that's super true. And now it's even magnified even more when you can track different things and you really know the true cost of doing business, especially in hockey. So now hockey's gone to the point where you couldn't monitor, the game per catapult or heart rate, but there's a system that's been embedded for the last 2 years now, 2 seasons probably, that tracks player movement on the ice, and it's a chip that's in the jersey. So now we actually know some really specific and cool metrics in hockey, and basketball has it. Basketball has had it. So to see that and really kind of be able to plan, okay, what speeds do we really need to recreate, and how many times do we need to do it? and player load throughout the course of a season, and how much do we really have to practice? I think that's cool. Was I looking at that stuff during my time with the Sharks? Yeah, but I was just scratching the surface, So to have that position and role and cross-reference it with, the actual sport activity or how to develop younger players on your team to do those things at a high level or get them to build into that, like that was what I wish I had, because remember in San Jose, like it was me, an assistant strength coach, and then our minor league strength coach. So I was taking reservations, I was bussing tables, I was cooking appetizers, I was trying to do everything. And was I discouraged about that? A little bit, but at the same time, it gave me an appreciation for a lot of different areas, so that maybe when I got into this position, I would be able to utilize or even just hire. So
yeah, I remember Sean talking about all the guys, hockey guys, like they were his family, the equipment guys, and they have a rough job. And then, even though he's not an equipment guy, he was always helping because those were his friends. And then, but it's not part of his job, but it could be time spent with his family or working on other things or working with players. And that was a tough part of it when you don't spend that money to have all of these roles, right?
Right. Well, and you just, for me with hockey, it was like, I could have used a couple other different roles, and to use like the data side of things, like, I had so much good information over 16 years. And even when Kevin Neild was there, we were starting to build different ideas or tests and track more things on the ice to really know, okay, what really matters to speed? What off ice measure really correlates to speed? Is it vertical jump? It may not be. So I wanted to dive into those a little bit more and become a little more formal. And then actually, maybe I was trying to look down the road of like, maybe this gets published. Maybe it becomes a really awesome study of a distribution of a lot of young pro hockey players. But never got to that. It's going to get filed in the garage, and then it's going to move on. And I'll leave it to one of my kids to write up on it when they.
There you go. Mike, talk to us about the difference right now. And you touched on it a little bit earlier about that you're, obviously athlete centric. But what are some things maybe that you are doing or considerations that you're taking with basketball players that you weren't taking with hockey players, or maybe some hockey player stuff that you don't need to worry about maybe in basketball?
Yeah. Two examples. One, I spent my career focusing on shoulder injuries, pelvic floor injuries, low back, and then concussions, right? Now my wavelength on the injury prevention side, or injury rehab and RTP, is shifted to, low back, because of compressive forces of jumping and being big individuals, right? And then the knee and the calf and the Achilles, right? So I've had to kind of relearn and almost do a deeper dive into those types of areas, which has been great. It's been cool to explore those things. I'm always obviously continuing to learn more about it. But that's one of the things that just stuck out right away for me. The other interesting piece is like how like specific your extra conditioning has to be in terms of gameplay for the guys who play low minutes. I use this example all the time, and people are probably sick of me. People in the hockey world are probably sick of me talking about it, but like I would have been a lot more specific with what the healthy scratch guys did for extra minutes, because it's so close. It should be so close related to gameplay, not just up and down the ice and sprint or hop on the bike and things like that. Basketball, at least with our team, they do an amazing job, and I've gotten involved with a lot of the planning of like, okay, this guy plays 8 minutes a night, or he doesn't play. We need to prep him for a role of 20 to 25 minutes, and we're going to get that through half court gameplay. We're going to get that through full court gameplay and re-simulate it, or we're going to get it from 1-on-1 or 2v2 type play. So that's been awesome. Like I would steal that. I actually have the rights to that idea if I ever go back to hockey and re-simulate it, because I think it can be. I could have planned it out better.
Would it be harder in hockey with just the fact that like a basketball court a lot of times is usually with practice rinks, it's not just that team's practice rink. I think the Devils probably have that, right? But a lot of teams, you're really sharing that rink. that would
Time.
probably be a challenge, right?
Yeah, time is a big factor if you're a visiting team on the road and you got to get off the ice.
Yeah.
But the other major factor, which is really interesting in basketball, you don't have enough assistant coaches, and you may not have enough capable assistant coaches to skate against these guys. So in basketball, we had, throughout the year, we had 4 extra players, or maybe 5 if it was a real low minute guy that we wanted to get extra play into. So then we have these development coaches 5, 6, 7-fold at a time. So they step in and play basketball against these guys, which is pretty cool, So you can round out a team and to get 5-on-5 or 3v3 or 4v4. In hockey, you got to hope you have a couple at least good assistant coaches and then maybe 3 extra guys. But then you play a small sided game where you time it and make it intense for a certain interval, not like just in zone shinny. Guys are out there for 3 minutes and they're exhausted and it looks like shit at the end of it.
Yeah.
So there's definitely managerial ways to plan that I've stolen. And that's the cool thing, Ant, too. And there's so many cool things about this position, but one of them is like just talking with coaches, me coming from hockey for so long and then being in basketball and just sharing ideas. And like, there's a lot of commonalities that you can discuss, and there's a lot of, I took the idea from basketball. There's no reason why a basketball coach couldn't take, maybe a theme or a way to teach a certain drill, offensively or defensively in hockey, so it could be, it's kind of neat to see that from a true coaching standpoint and to see the sport, all science aside,
Yeah. Mike, last question here, just in terms of, anybody that watches just even a little bit of hockey knows the playoffs are just a war zone, and those guys get beat up. We anybody that's following saw what was going on with Florida, even in the first round. Most of the injuries happened against Boston in the first round. They went to the Stanley Cup. Guys were playing on broken ankles and punctured lungs and all this stuff. What is how was when you guys I know you went to the semifinals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously playing 3 series. How is that different from kind of the off season been for you compared to hockey, and what are some things? Are you able to jump into things quicker? How's that going for you
in terms of the playoffs?
Yeah, like off season, like that transition from playoffs when you had hockey players that were beat up and there were certain things you had to do. Is it a little bit easier in basketball or?
They carry their, fatigue into the playoffs too, and bumps and bruises for lack of a better term. They most certainly do. And the pace gets ratcheted up. You could see it get ratcheted up. And as I guess I become more of a basketball, coach in the sport, like I'll be able to see it even more so than I did in hockey. Hockey was like clear. I remember that. I will never forget my first playoff hockey game, and I was like, "Holy shit, this is not the regular season."
Yeah, man.
In basketball, like the intensity in the locker room, the intensity with how much our guys wanted to win, and I would say the pace of the play that I saw was ratcheted up too. So it's very, very similar in that. There's a lot of things, Ant, like and we don't have enough time to talk about it, but like you just erase basketball and write in hockey, and and you can erase hockey and put in basketball, just from the athlete's preparation and the timing and there's a lot of cool commonality things, like because it's pro sport, maybe I don't know, maybe it's just it's cool to see that it's very similar, in that respect.
Yeah, very cool. And so it was just kind of, I really wanted to just see how this all went and really, what were some of the things that you learned, which obviously we learned a lot about what you learned and how that transition was and what the challenges were. So, but I'm just so glad, so happy for you that, it sounds like it's awesome. Sounds like if you got offered a better job in hockey, you'd still stay in basketball. So
I don't know. We'll see. It depends on what team it is. But yeah, I tell everybody and again, like for those who want to get into basketball or pro hockey, like I've been blessed to have some amazing mentors and people that I've learned from along the way. I wasn't, I was concerned about losing my job in hockey. So I most certainly used my network to find out if there was things out there. But this position, from just from my family standpoint, I didn't move. I still live in San Jose. My kids are in the same schools. My kids started some different schools.
Amazing.
My wife started a new job at a school that my youngest kids go to. So there was we didn't have to move. My commute got longer, which I don't care, So the only bad thing about the whole switching jobs, the two bad things was, one, I do miss my friends that I've made over the bunch of years in San Jose, but I had to give up my truck. I got an electric car, so I didn't have to buy gas anymore because California is like $5.50 a gallon. So that was the only thing. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So, but it's been great. So I'm glad I could share it with the listeners.
Yeah, Mike, thanks again for doing this. Good luck this off season and into the next season. And obviously, you and I aren't going anywhere. We're gonna kind of keep in touch, and we'll see.
I'll see you in Indiana. Yeah.
There you go. That's right,
Yeah.
Pacers, baby.
Yeah. There you go. I know. Yeah, no more Islanders, Sharks. Yeah.
Yeah, come on, it's bull.
Awesome.
But Mike, thanks again for doing this, brother.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you for having me.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 360 of the Strength Coach Podcast. The notes are located at continuefit.com or strengthcoachpodcast.com. Don't forget, you can try the new strengthcoach.com out for 7 days for free at strengthcoach.com. Special thanks to Chris Parry and the folks over at Perform Better. On sale right now, 50% off a bunch of stuff, including bumper plates, kettlebells, and dumbbells. Chicago and Providence functional training summits are coming up. Guys, don't miss out on this. Take advantage of the early bird specials and hotel discounts at both locations. Check it all out at performbetter.com. Thanks to Coach Boyle, Sean Skane, and Mike Potenza for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength conditioning and performance enhancement. Thanks to Sumit Seth and Naamly, helping build relationships through personalized communication so your members stay longer and pay longer. Go to Naamly.com. Use the referral code StrengthCoach to get started on a free 30-day trial. Thanks to AG1 from Athletic Greens. Visit athleticgreens.com/StrengthCoach to get your free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs today. That's going to do it for this episode. My name is Anthony Renna. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.